Welcome to the Women in Maintenance podcast, a place where women in maintenance share their stories. I'm your host, Caitlyn Young-Gilbert, CMRP, and I'm the Chief of Staff at Upkeep and founder of the maintenance community over at upkeep.org. Each episode, I'll be meeting with female leaders in maintenance to discuss their career journeys and share best practices to help other women within the maintenance community thrive. Today, we're excited to have Trena Ellis on the show. Welcome, Trena.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Trena is currently the Vice President of Facilities at Safe Credit Union, with over 25 years of experience in facilities, vendor management, real estate strategy, and building process management, just to name a few. Trena is also president of IFMA, International Facility Management Association, at the Sacramento Valley chapter. Welcome to the podcast, Trena. Really excited to learn from you today.
Thank you so much.
I want to start off the show by asking if you could share with our listeners a little bit more about you and your background. How were you first introduced to the field of maintenance and reliability?
Sure. So I just recently got the job at Safe Credit Union here in the greater Sacramento area. And prior to Safe, I was at a company called Power School, and I was there for 21 years. I started when it was a startup and worked with them through multiple acquisitions. We got bought by Apple and Pearson and Vista, and then we acquired 11 companies over maybe, I think, a 6-year time span, which a lot of integration, acquiring multiple buildings, which included sites across North America. I had one site in Canada. Most of the sites were in the US, and then I had 2 sites in India. So, it was a lot of experience, a lot of vendor management internationally and across the US. So my career has really grown. And prior to that, I was at real estate companies and different types of property management companies and air conditioning companies, which taught me a lot about HVAC maintenance. I'm very grateful for all of the companies I've worked for and all of the different things I've learned over those years.
Wow. I'm hearing from your experience, you have just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to vendor management. So I'd love to dig into that as our first question on the show. I'd really love to know, as the primary negotiator when it comes to building partnerships, vendor contracts, and long-term strategies, what would you say is the primary success factor for building that professional repertoire?
I think the primary, most important thing is in my career, I've had, especially at Power School and even prior, a lot of my vendors were long-term, 20 plus years. I had some of them. And what I did and what I taught my team is basically set the precedent at the very beginning. They know what your expectations are of what they are supposed to do to help you maintain whatever it is. And then when they bypass that expectation or they don't kind of satisfy that, you can have very strong conversations and just, lay it out and say, look, this is what the expectation was and it's not happening. So let's talk about it. So it's really just really engaging with that vendor and making sure that the relationship is there. And I've had some vendors that have really, come to task for me in construction build outs with timelines that they wouldn't have done for another vendor or another company because of the relationship that we had, right? They really would, do everything they could to make sure that I hit my budget and my timelines.
Excellent. So relationships are absolutely key.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to folks who are new to managing vendors who need to start building those relationships?
Well, something that I've always taught my team, any of my team members, any of my maintenance technicians or facility managers at various locations, is when a vendor comes on site to fix anything, it doesn't matter what it is. And this is how I've learned a lot about the built environment, and I'm able to do very large tenant improvements and construction projects, is every time a vendor comes on site, walk with them to whatever they are fixing and ask them questions. People love to talk about their jobs, and it'll enable you to learn what's broken, how it's fixed. And then the next time something happens, you're able to speak to what is the problem, and then you can engage and get to a solution. So I think it's just really learning all the different pieces and parts. You don't have to learn it to be able to do it, but you have to learn it to be able to explain it. So that's the key.
That's incredible advice. Always be learning and at the same time building that relationship with the vendors.
Exactly.
Next question for you. Where can organizations start when it comes to implementing a strong facility program? And would you say that differs for if you have a multi-branch buildings, you have different locations?
I think one of the simplest things someone can do is making sure that you're documenting. One of the things I've always had in practice with vendor management and, just making sure you have a list of, I manage sites with, across the US and India, and I always made sure that every single location had a vendor list, and not just a vendor list, because one of the things that, you're doing succession planning, or, folks leave jobs, is I would always ask my staff, make sure we have a full vendor list that shows the vendor name, who your contact is, and exactly explain what that vendor does. So I would always make a joke and say, because if you ever win the lottery and never come back to work, someone can look at that list and know exactly who to call when there's an issue. So I think that's one of the bases of a good vendor management program.
How do you find new vendors? If you're in a new location?
That's a great question. So you mentioned that I am president of the local Sacramento Valley chapter of IFMA. I really do highly recommend folks to join local networking associations, not specifically IFMA, but others. It doesn't matter, but whatever your industry is, just so that you can meet and network with vendors. Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And over my career, I'm going on my 4th year of being president of the Sacramento Valley chapter, but I've been a part of the association since 2008. And I would not be in my career as a vice president if it wasn't for all of the wealth of knowledge that I've learned from those networking activities, and all of the vendors that show up to those association meetings and, teach us, what we don't know, and what we, you see that, oh my gosh, I probably need that. And, and other people give you advice, other facility managers, other, facility professionals, you can network off of them as well.
And similarly, I'm guessing you would give advice to vendors themselves to seek out those opportunities to speak to those groups.
Absolutely. It's just a great way to market your, what you do. And we also, through IFMA, we have a lot of, programs, and we allow or give opportunities to vendors to be able to showcase what they do and explain what they do, which then in turn helps facility professionals to, oh, I need that, right? So it works out.
Awesome. Thank you. And I hear you continuing to mention, you always teach your team and you always try and help your team get better through different forms of knowledge. And so I'm curious, as you were growing in your career, did you have a mentor? Did you have someone teaching you these skills? And do you have any mentors today?
So I have multiple mentors through the IFMA Association, and it's just great to be able to leverage off, just when you're thinking about something and you're like, I don't know how to approach this, and having the ability to do that. So when I worked for Apple, my mentor was my boss. Your mentor can be anyone, right? It can be your boss, it can be a coworker, it can be a family member, but just someone that you can talk to. And like when I was at Apple, my boss, Bill Brunson, I'm going to mention his name, he's retired now, but he took me under his wing and literally had me sit in on construction. I'd never done a construction project. And I got to go to the Apple campus in Sacramento and sit in project meetings and learn about vendors and learn. And, you just really want to have someone that will, take you under their wing and teach you things. And to the other part of your question, I still have members of my previous staff that still contact me for things. So I'm still mentoring, still, teaching. And yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do is to teach.
That's incredible. And I'm curious, do you have any specific advice you would give to young women looking to join this industry in these roles?
So I do believe that you should get involved in associations and networking, because that is one of the key pieces of learning all the different aspects that, has to do with the built environment, and learning all the different things that need to be maintained and kept up. And you learn so much from just participating with others in programs and events. And, you're just constantly learning.
Wonderful. Trena, thank you so much for your time today. I'm curious if you would be willing to share with our listeners, how can people connect with you if they have questions around vendor management or things about built environments? What's the best way to contact you?
I'm happy to connect with anyone who wants to connect on LinkedIn. So just send me a note in LinkedIn and send me a request to connect, and I'll be happy to chat.
Perfect. Thank you again, Trena, for joining us. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to today's episode of the Women in Maintenance podcast. My name is Caitlyn Young-Gilbert. I'm the Chief of Staff at Upkeep and founder of the Maintenance Community. You can connect with me on LinkedIn under Caitlyn Young-Gilbert. You can also find me and Trena in the Maintenance Community Slack group over at upkeep.org. Feel free to ask us any follow-up questions from today's episode or suggest future topics. Hope to connect with you all soon. Until next time.
you.